Hello, my name is Nick Deborah, and in this short video, I wanted to basically compare a chart that was created probably by somebody who didn't know a lot about data visualization, but using AI, and a chart that was created by an expert. I consider myself to be a database expert using AI as well. And so the chart that I'm using for this comparison is actually a chart from a report by Anthropic, which is a company that makes Claude code. And so I think it's safe to assume that the people who created this chart probably used AI to create it, but there are reasons to believe that they perhaps didn't know very much about data visualization. You know, if I take sort of a critical eye to this chart, well, I mean, just to explain it first, at least what it's trying to do is to show us for all of these various, I think there are 22 types of jobs here, which ones have the highest percentage of tasks that could potentially be performed by AI, and then based on Claude's own observations, what percentage of tasks within each job category are actually being performed by AI, people are actually using it. I don't want to talk about the validity of the data or the study. I'm just going to focus on the chart type for now. And of course, you know, you probably noticed this is what's called a radar graph or a spiderweb graph. And this is actually maybe more of a personal opinion, but this is one of the dozen or so chart types that I actually don't recommend using for kind of standard reporting because it's unfamiliar to a lot of people, hard to read, and there are always better alternatives. And of course, I'm going to show you one in a moment. And also, like, why is the scale showing 0 to 1 as opposed to 0% to 100%? Because it is showing kind of parts of a total. Why aren't the categories sorted? You know, it'd probably be a lot easier to read if we sorted the categories from, for example, the jobs that have the highest potential for task displacement to lowest or something like that, or maybe alphabetical or something. But it looks like they're kind of in random order. And the title here is kind of, not telling us very much, right? It's very generic, right? It's theoretical capacity and observed usage by occupational category. There's no real kind of message here. And that's probably my biggest criticism of this chart, right? It's very unclear, like, what is the point of this chart? Like, what am I trying to get from this? Nothing is highlighted. There's no annotations. There's nothing, nothing in the title to really tell me, like, what does this mean essentially? And so I got my hands on the data behind this chart and decided to redesign it using AI. I created this much simpler chart. It's just a stacked bar chart, of course, but at least it's sorted, right? So the jobs that basically have the highest potential for displacement are on top. Much easier to compare, the actual observed displacement as well in this case. And so I think a chart like this actually has a lot more value, right? People are going to get a lot more from it, and a lot more people are going to get something from it because we're not relying on them understanding this kind of a bit obscure, chart type. Now, after I created this chart, I started to notice some things. Like, it does seem that there are certain types of jobs which tend to have much higher kind of displacement values, and they tend to be jobs that require more training or expertise, and also jobs that had, of course, a smaller kind of physical work component. And so I went back into the data and I asked AI to actually categorize these job types. I did it in Gemini and Claude on the high setting, and it's okay. I had to do a little bit of fixing, but that's kind of a topic for another video. So that all of these categories were ranked from the amount of training required, high, medium, low, and physical work required, high, medium, low. And then I used that data to come up with this chart. Obviously, it's a bit more complicated, but it's probably a bit more interesting and a bit more valuable, right? Because I have the jobs organized from physical work required, low, medium, high, expertise required, high, medium, low, and the dots represent the kind of potential for displacement and actual displacement. And I can see, oh yeah, look at this. Actually, indeed, jobs that have a high kind of amount of expertise or training required, but a low amount of physical work required, tend to have much darker dots, right? Like, they tend to be much more at risk of displacement. Whereas jobs that required, medium or sort of low amounts of training, and so construction or transportation, that also, of course, have a high kind of physical work component to them, much lighter dots. Interesting. And so this, to me, is a chart that has considerably more value than the original chart. And so what am I taking away from this? Well, I've been noticing this pattern for quite a while now, that tasks that require expertise in a domain. So here we were looking at designing charts, but I think it also applies to writing good legal contracts or making, accurate medical diagnoses. And for those kinds of tasks, AI in the hands of non-experts often produces results that have far less actual value, and sometimes even negative value, right? They actually end up doing more harm than good, as compared with results from somebody who has that domain expertise, who is also using AI. And so something like this just actually has very kind of limited value as compared to, the output of a domain expert also using AI. And this is something that is often kind of not even mentioned in a lot of the AI demos that I see. They'll just say, hey, look, we produce this great chart or dashboard or analysis without ever really considering, well, like how valuable is it? Like, what is the actual quality of this result? Is it serving the purpose that it was intended to serve, and how effectively is it? It just is often not really mentioned, but I think it's pretty important. And I think part of the reason for that is that very often the people who are doing these demos, because they lack domain expertise, they don't even realize essentially how bad the AI result actually is, right? Like if you don't know anything about data visualization, you might look at this and think, oh yeah, cool chart, without realizing that there are in fact much kind of better alternatives. Now, having said all that, AI in the hands of a domain expert, well, it can save a considerable amount of time. For example, this chart here, I used AI to create it, and it would have been a lot more time consuming to actually try and create something like this in Excel or Tableau. So it was actually a time saver. Again, though, I had the expertise to know what to ask the AI for. But even in these cases, and this is, I'm finding very often the case, the kind of finishing touches need to be added kind of by hand. And so, the initial result that I got from AI, for example, had these labels were out of place, and I couldn't get it to put them in the right locations. I couldn't get it to add these annotations. They looked terrible. And so I had to kind of bring it into PowerPoint and add those myself. So, the AI gets you 80 or 90% of the way there. But then again, you need that domain expertise to know how to bring it into another tool and put on those kind of finishing touches. And also maybe a bit of a kind of a sideline comment here is that I've also found that for domain experts, using AI can actually take more time in many cases. Like especially if I'm creating a relatively simple chart, simple bar chart or line chart, it can actually take less time. Remember this chart that I showed you before? I said I created it in AI. I lied. I actually created it in Excel. Why? Because I knew it would take me probably less than 30 seconds to do in Excel, because I know how to use Excel. So I have that kind of tool expertise, and it would have just taken a little longer to explain what I wanted in full sentences and probably have to go through a couple of iterations with an AI and then wait for the AI to produce each subsequent iteration. So ultimately, what does this mean? Well, in my opinion anyways, based on the current state of AI technology as I record this in mid-March 2026, if you want to reliably create effective charts using AI, or not for that matter, you just need to have data visualization domain expertise so that you can know what to ask the AI for and know how to spot and fix the problems in the charts that AI gives back to you, because there will be problems. In all the examples that I showed, there were problems that I noticed that I had to fix, and I wouldn't be able to do that if I didn't have the expertise. And then finally, that very often for relatively simple tasks, an expert can actually accomplish those in less time using a GUI or some other kind of dedicated software tool rather than AI. Again, not really kind of something that's discussed very often, but perhaps should be part of the discussion. If you feel that you perhaps maybe need to level up your data visualization skills, I can of course help you out with that. I now have an on-demand version of my practical charts course, 6.5 hours of video and 45 lessons. There's a discount code there. If you decide to register, you can get 25% off just for having watched this video. And I do also deliver it as private workshops, either live online or at your location. I'm now up to 15 or 16 countries, I think, for 15 to 60 employees in your organization. Information about all these options and more can be found, of course, on my website, practicalreporting.com. Thanks very much for watching.